The Retirement Cafe Podcast, Episode 20, How to Plan with Confidence for Later Life, with Jane Finnerty of SOLLA.
Retired or thinking about retirement? You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Retirement Cafe Podcast. In each episode, we bring you an important conversation with insight, tips and knowledge, all designed to help you live a fulfilling and successful life in retirement. Here's your host, Chartered Financial Planner and Accredited Later Life Advisor, Justin King.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Retirement Cafe Podcast. If you're new here, a very warm welcome to the show. Today, I would like to share a conversation I had recently with a lovely lady called Jane Finnerty. With a background in working with elderly people, Jane quickly realised how difficult it was for more elderly people to get the right kind of financial advice. It's fair to say that retirement today is significantly more complex than the retirement of our grandparents' generation. With this complexity comes a plethora of different financial planning needs. Jane felt that there should be a way that people could identify the advisors best qualified to help them during this stage of life. This led Jane to co-found a not-for-profit organisation called the Society of Later Life, or SOLLA for short. Jane talks me through her story and why today's more complex retirements need a different approach to planning. Today, I'd like to welcome Jane Finnerty from the Society of Later Life Advisors, known as SOLLA. Welcome, Jane.
Good morning, Justin.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me this morning. Thank you.
No, it's great to be able to chat to you. Tell me, could you tell our listeners and myself a little bit about who you are and who is the Society of Later Life Advisors?
Okay. Well, I started my life off with a charity called Help the Aged, which is now Age UK. And then I, as a lot of people do, moved into financial services during the 1980s and became increasingly interested in the fact that a lot of older people just didn't think that they needed financial advice once they got to retirement. And so life went on and I was advising more and more older clients because my clients are aging. And then I was asked by what was the regulator's name then, the Financial Services Authority, if I could have a look at some examination standards for long-term care and equity release, which I did. And then I thought to myself, what can we do to ensure that older people are able to access the right kind of advisor at the right time? And that's when I met my joint chair, Trish Hanifan, who's a barrister who specialises in older client law. And we decided it might be quite a good idea to have an accreditation. And from that emerged the Society of Later Life Advisors, well over 10 years ago now. So we've been around for a while.
Wow. That's I didn't realise it'd been going so long. Accreditations, is this just you fill in a form and get a badge? I mean, how does it actually work?
It most definitely isn't, Justin, as I'm sure you well know. We really do want to make sure that people out there can find the right types of advisors. Now, advisors now have to be incredibly well qualified, and I would say that almost all of our advisors are at least chartered level. But what the exams don't do is they don't test how good you are at explaining quite complex and sometimes very confusing aspects of later life advice. So we decided that this accreditation, it's really the gold standard, it's the icing on the cake. We test financial advisors who are regulated by the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. We test them with what we call soft skills, and it's how good they are at putting all that incredible technical knowledge into practice rather than just being a paper-based test. We actually meet all of our advisors. They have a 1.5 hour interview, and they have to be relicensed every year.
Wow. Okay. Now, Jane, why would there's a lot of financial advisors across the UK, and I'm sure that many are dealing with elderly clients or people in their retirement or later life, as you call it. So why should they maybe seek out someone from your organisation, SOLLA, rather than the person that they've been dealing with for a long time?
Yeah, so I might reverse that question, Justin. Why wouldn't they? I mean, the thing is, if advisors are out there dealing with people at and into retirement, they really should, I think, put themselves forward to prove that they have the skills required to deal with older clients in a way that we think is the absolute best. And I think as a client, why wouldn't you
Sure.
seek out a member?
And Jane, what skills what's different in that part of that later life stage of life? What's different now? What skills do those advisors really need to know about, or what do the clients what do they need to know about? Why is that different from their working life?
Okay, so I think when we sort of first engage with financial services, we get mortgages, think about pensions, and we really understand that we have to do something, maybe life assurance because we've got children. It all seems incredibly natural. At retirement, in the past, people didn't have to think too much because they had their sort of final salary pension and that kind of thing. But now these things are not in place like they used to be. Very few people coming through will have final salary pension schemes. They might have to think about paying for care. Very often they're thinking about how they're going to support their older children who perhaps need help with mortgages themselves, and parents. Of course, when you're in your 60s and 70s, very often your parents are still alive. So there's this generation of people coming through that are better off, and they really do have to think about what they need to do to make their money last throughout later life. They can't just sit back and hope really anymore. They do really need to make some proactive planning, and that's where a later life advisor comes in. They understand what those issues are, the fact that money might not last throughout retirement, and that there's other pressures on people at retirement now with the wider family and intergenerational issues. So those are the things that people really need to think about now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the pace of change that you must have seen if you're in your 70s or 80s, maybe 90s, that later life part of your life, the pace of change in financial services and the way we do everything, it just, if you must look back, it must be dramatic. I mean, even my working career, I'm approaching 50 now, and I just think, I was chatting to we've taken on a trainee financial planner in our business recently, and I was trying to explain that when I started working in an insurance brokerage at 16, we didn't have a computer to work out the insurance premiums. So people would come in, and I'd get out an underwriting guide, and I'd work out that their Ford Fiesta was a car group 2, and you lived in area 3 for the postcode you had, and that's actually how we did business. And cover notes were written in triplicate with carbon paper. And we have a lady one of my power planners who writes reports for me. She's technically excellent, and but started working in a typing pool. And I think, and I was trying to explain to our young man Ryan what a typing pool is. It's just kind of it's crackers. So the rate of change for people in their later life of the financial service, I can only imagine it must be confusing.
It can be confusing, and also, we had even on Radio 4 this morning, we clamping down on people actually paying because they've been loyal and they've not been able to shop around. And I think that we've got two sets of individuals really. We've got people in their 60s and 70s who are engaging with the technology, but they might not be brilliant at it. And then you've got your much older clients that are maybe late 70s and into their 80s and 90s and who are not engaging with the technology at all. And as a member of the Society of Later Life Advisors, you would understand that these issues exist and that people might want communications in very different ways. I'd even say that the government sometimes doesn't understand this. They're trying to get everything digitized and online. But we would expect a member of the society to understand that this is an issue and to be able to offer their clients any ways of communicating that they felt was most appropriate for them. In fact, that is one of the aspects that we do test during the accreditation, that the later life advisor does understand that and can communicate in the best way possible for that client to make sure that they can understand and access good information and advice.
Yeah. And do you think, you touched on it there, that even the government, trying to take tax digital and all this type of thing.
Yeah.
Do you think they're being disenfranchised by the financial services industry, clients of this age? We're having all the banks closing their branches. It's becoming more and more difficult to access the good accounts are the ones which pay, or are internet accounts which are paying higher interest rates, etc. Do you feel that's possibly unfair to the older
I
population?
I actually think that they're incredibly aware of it, because the financial watchdog, the Financial Conduct Authority, have been doing a lot of work in the last 2 or 3 years, and we've been inputting into it with regards to older clients and treating them fairly, treating them well. So I think that even the high street banks now are engaging with this, and very often they contact us and say, what do you think? Do you have brochures and things like that? So I do think the financial services are aware of it, and it's to their detriment and to their cost if they're not, because they will lose customers. So I think they are aware of it, but I still would maintain that somebody that's accredited by the society is probably the best at it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I do wonder whether, possibly I know that I shop around for my products. I try and look for a good interest-paying bank account, and I look for I keep an eye on what I'm paying for my utility bills, my gas and electricity, etc. All that type of thing. All this stuff is highly confusing, and possibly as you get older, you may not be kind of so into all of that. I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think there comes a time when actually, you might want to disengage completely from managing your own financial affairs. And again, if you deal with somebody in the society, they completely understand that might be the case, and that you might be working with a power of attorney. But I think also that as long as people remain engaged in some respect for as long as they possibly can, again, a member of the society will understand that it's the individual's choices and not necessarily their power of attorney. I think that works. But again, not all advisors understand this.
No.
And again, I still believe that the quality above price to some extent is very important. So paying for quality financial advice, where perhaps the advisor is very engaged in those things and can say, did you know, have you done this? Did you know you're probably paying a bit too much for this? Again, members of the society are very engaged in that. They understand it because they deal with older clients day in, day out. They're more engaged, and they understand, and I guess they care just that little bit more.
Sure. And you touched on it a second ago. I'd like to pick up on the other organisations that you're involved in maybe influencing or in the steering committees, etc. Do you want to tell me more about that?
Yeah, so we like to say that we reach the parts that other financial services organisations can't. We're a consumer organisation. We're incredibly well trusted. Most people that come to the society to find an advisor do so through a third party. So we deal with consumer bodies such as which refer to us, the Inland Revenue, all of the charities that deal with older people. And we're consistently asked to comment on policy by both the government and by the Department of Health. So we're in the thick of it, Justin, we really are. And we're very proud that we've been able to build that reputation up over, well over a decade now.
Great. And what would you put down, maybe one of those groups that your biggest success has been? What are you most proud of?
It's difficult to say. I think it's great to be endorsed by a very trusted brand such as Which. I think it's our engagement with government bodies that understand that older people really do need to take advice. And if they're going to take advice from anyone, why should it not be a member of the Society of Later Life Advisors? Because those advisors have been independently accredited by a trusted third party who does not profit from the products sold or the advice given. We are objective, and everybody that can be found on our website has reached that accreditation standard. Otherwise, they can't be on the website or found by the consumer.
I often think about how, often families now are a little bit separated out, aren't they? The children
Yes.
are living in a different town and from our mum and dad or where they were brought up. And, children often talk to me about being concerned about their mum and dad's financial affairs, etc. So how could children or people being concerned, how do they find out more about your organisation, or where they can go and find one of these advisors in their local town?
Yeah. So they can come to the Society of Later Life Advisor website. They can find an advisor that's local to them. They can contact us if they've got some maybe non-financial questions, and we can usually point them in the right direction and then refer them on to a member of the society. What I would say is that above all, it's very important if families can have this discussion with their parents, because I think it's important that parents understand that the concern goes beyond money, which very often in families it does, and that it's for their well-being. And I think that if you're abroad or if you're not local to your parent, it's really important to recognise that they will have social networks around them. They're not necessarily going to want to leave them and come and live close to you. And it's just understanding where your parent's sitting at that stage, or your loved one, it could be a relative, in that stage of their life. And they might not want the same things as you think they do. And that's why it's important to have that conversation. And it's tricky. It's not an easy one.
No. And of course, as we get older, we often our health declines, and therefore that brings in even more complications.
Yes, it does, definitely. I would agree with that.
I know that part of the accreditation that I did when to get accredited with yourselves was look at how we would deal with people in ill health,
Yes.
with different conditions from dementia to Parkinson's to all types of things, and have that real consideration of how you can facilitate advice for people in different circumstances.
Yeah, and it's important that you understand that as an advisor, and that you can engage effectively. So it might be that, for example, shorter meetings at different times of the day, and it might be that you have a home visit, but we know for a fact that many older ladies definitely like to come out, and they like to come and visit an advisor in their offices. And again, it's not making those presumptions as to what an older client would want. It's really treating them as the client and understanding that.
Yeah.
And very often, just checking out that what's happening is what the client actually wants, and that they're not under any pressure from family, because that can happen as well, Justin.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So I think, for me, the purpose of SOLLA is all about building trust in the advice that has been given, allowing people to go, you know what, this is not just someone telling me that they're good. I know they've been checked out that they're good,
Yeah.
and they've risen to the levels necessary from an independent body. Would you agree that's the real
I would
purpose?
agree with it. And again, what you said at the beginning, why should somebody use a SOLLA member? Any financial advisor that is dealing with older clients should be considering having the accreditation and going through this third-party sort of due diligence. Because if you are good, why wouldn't you? That's what we would say.
Sure.
It would make sense.
And I suppose anyone looking for advice, or even considering the advice that they're currently getting, or maybe their mum and dad are getting, is that statement of, okay, so why aren't you a member?
Yes, and we found over the years that people do come along to our introduction courses, and they say, well, actually I'm here because my dad's solicitor said you are a member, aren't you? So we don't mind how people get to us, as long as they do, if they're in that older client market.
No, and I think, and the solicitors again have a similar accreditation, don't they? For
they do.
Solicitors for elderly, is that correct?
That's right. And then from next April, solicitors are going to have to justify why they have referred their clients to a certain advisor, and we think that will bring a lot of advisors to the society to say, oh, my solicitor said I should really have a look at this. I think it's for me. So we're looking forward to that.
Absolutely. And I suppose that if you're looking for a solicitor to work, we work in close connection, obviously arranging powers of attorney and wills and trusts and all this type of thing. And again, the question should be, from the advisor perspective, is what due diligence have we done on the solicitor?
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, if they're if they're later life advisors themselves, that's a really good thing.
Yeah, they'll understand the issues. And I think what is good about Solicitors for the Elderly is they do understand why somebody needs regulated when and why they need regulated financial advice. And I think in the past, solicitors haven't always recognised that. So it's great that that's moved on quite a lot. I would recommend that anybody does seek out a regulated financial advisor that has been accredited by us. We had some legislation through back sort of 2015, the CARE Act. And in the CARE Act, it does actually say that organisations that provide information advice should refer to an advisor that is not only properly qualified but is also accredited. So it is recognised by government, and we're very proud of that.
Yeah, and of course the paying for care is another huge 3 a.m. moment, as I call it, for people as they get older. And of course, getting good advice around that is hugely important.
Yeah, and what we've found over the years is if somebody's in a crisis situation, parents become very seriously ill, or is coming out of hospital, it does focus the mind on this. But what we would always say is just speak to a member of the society. They'll be able to give you some good guidance and navigate you through the system. We also have other third parties that give non-regulated advice, affiliate members, and again, a lot of our advisors work with non-regulated providers of information advice to help clients get through that very, very tricky time. But the absolutely best thing to do is think about it now when you're fit and well and during retirement, because there's nothing like sort of getting your plans in place, really, if you can.
No, I have a little line saying, if you don't have a plan, you end up being part of someone else's plan.
Yeah, exactly. And do you want other people making those choices for you?
Absolutely.
And often the answer is no, I don't.
So, Jane, where can people, could you just mention your web address? I will put it in the show notes, but your web address and possibly where people could get in contact with you if they wanted to.
Yeah, www.Society of Later Life Advisors, and that's advisors with an e.co.uk. We've got a web inquiry form on there that comes through to me as well as to the admin team. So if anybody's got any questions, quite happy to take those. Looking forward to hearing from people.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time this morning, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thanks very much.
A big thank you to Jane Finnerty for joining me for this episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast. You can find the show notes for this episode along with some useful links at theretirementcafe.co.uk. And if you'd like to let me know what you think about the points we discussed, please send an email to jk@mfpwealthmanagement.co.uk or connect with me on Twitter at JustinKingCFP. Next week, we'll be hearing another personal story of the early retirement years from Anne Rowe. Anne discusses how she divides her time between sport and adventurous holidays, family and charitable work for Marie Curie, as well as the challenges she has faced along the way. Be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode. Until next time, this is Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.
Thank you for listening to the Retirement Cafe podcast with Justin King. To find out more, you can find us online at theretirementcafe.co.uk.